friends, I'm Peter, also known as Universal Head from the Esoteric Order of Gamers, and today I want to tell you a little bit about a game called Fantasy Commander. Now, the people at Signum Games sent me this game, and they're sending me some other stuff to check out as well. They make really nice miniatures, and they also make games. This is their 5th Kickstarter campaign. It's just been launched on Kickstarter, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about it. My first impression was BattleLore, but with more. That's kind of my tagline for this one. It has a whole bunch of lovely 20mm scale miniatures. You can see I've got bags full of them here. Now, I must point out I haven't had time to play this yet. Unfortunately, COVID, the Omicron wave, hit New Zealand. It's been very difficult to find opportunities to play. I'm going to play a game of it in a few days, and then I'll do an update to this video. But for the moment, I'm going to do an overview of this one. The other thing I want to point out before I show you this is that I'm not being paid for this video. I'm doing it because they sent me a copy to check out and I wanted to show it to you. So I'm not directly endorsing their Kickstarter or anything like that. I'm just showing you what the game is about so you can make your own informed decision. Right, let's check out Fantasy Commander. Well, here's what I've got in my prototype set, and of course the contents of your set may vary depending on which version you buy. There's a heap of miniatures here. I'll show you those in a moment. Lots and lots of counters, terrain hexes. You can see that's quite a similar style to BattleLore again. We've got a whole lot of cards here. There's unit cards and special cards, battle cards, etc. Cards for the campaign. A couple of player screens, some lovely wooden dice with symbols. Again, quite similar in style to BattleLore. And behind it all, you've got this play mat, which is a hex-based player mat. You can see it's made up of hexes there. And this is some kind of plastic material. I'm not sure what the final board will be made of. Perhaps it's made of this, I don't know. But as you can see, quite a lot in the set. So here we have the game all set up for a scenario. Now, there are several modes of play in Fantasy Commander. There are a lot of scenarios available, so you can play an existing scenario. This one is called Undead Invasion, because you can see all the undead here about to attack. There's also a standalone campaign mode, which is a solo mode where you can play through an entire campaign of connected scenarios. And then there's a Battle Royale mode, where you can set up any kind of combat that you like between your existing forces. So this one's a scenario. As you can see, we've set up the board according to the rules of the scenario. And we've got some terrain and stuff there. We've got deployment areas where we can put our forces. We've got a choice, of course, where we can deploy all these forces. And lovely miniatures. I'll show you those in detail after this overview. Now you've got your unit cards. Here they are. This is all the stats you need for your particular forces that you've got. You've got a little screen here which you can use to hide your orders. Now this deck, I'll tell you about this in a moment. This is a special event deck for each player. There's a victory point deck there as well. And of course we've got your dice. Now these order tokens we're going to be using all the way through the game. I'll describe those in a moment. Now when you put your forces together, you can build your own event deck, and you have a number of specific event cards which apply to the specific forces that you're using. So for example, the skeletal warriors might put in unstoppable undead. You've also got, depending on the number of forces you have, the number of units divided by 2, you put in some misfortune cards as well, so you can draw some bad things during your turn. Every time you activate a unit, you'll be drawing one of these cards, so it'll give you either something bad or most likely something good. And this, I assume, adds a lot of variety and interest to each turn. The quest deck is built according to the dictates of the scenario, and this card is always face up to start with. As you go through the game, you can achieve these objectives and grab the victory points for them. So they're worth a victory point each. And as you grab one, another one comes up. So there's always things going on to make your victory conditions vary during the scenario. I'll give you a quick overview of the turn sequence. Now, I'm not going into huge detail here, but this will give you an idea of how Fantasy Commander plays. You have a command phase, an action phase, and an end of turn phase. Now, in the command phase, the most important thing you're going to do is generate orders, which are these counters here, that as you can see come in various colours. Now, depending on your actual units, it'll tell you how many orders you generate, either specific ones, or you can actually roll a dice to generate them. You can generate red, blue and green ones, but purple ones are specific to particular units. Now, when you start a turn, you're going to be placing these order tokens face down next to your units, according to the strategy you have for the game. When you get onto the action phase, you're going to be activating the units in order from red to blue to green, and purple acts as wild, so you can exchange that for any of those. You can have any number of yellow ones because they always go last. Players alternate activating their units according to these order tokens. So if this were all of the units available on the board, the evil player would get to activate both of these red ordered units before the good player got to activate their blue ordered unit. So this adds a lot of strategy and tactics to the order of play, which is very important in this game. You can also use these order tokens for other things. You can spend them for defense as well. So very, very crucial things, these order tokens. Now, when it's your turn to activate a unit, you will draw an event card every time you activate a unit. You see what happens on that card, and then you can, with your unit, move and or combat, run, do a range combat, or rest. You can also spend your precious order tokens to activate special abilities on the card. Some of these cards have, as you can see, the archers here. If you spend a green order, you can get +2 to your shooting. There's another mechanic as well, which is fatigue. Units can take a certain number of fatigue, and you can spend these fatigue tokens to boost attacks, boost defense, or even cancel damage. And of course, if you take a rest action, you can clear your fatigue. Another interesting thing in this game is that if terrain cards are built in as part of the event deck, you can actually create terrain during the game, and it has special abilities as well. Combat itself is pretty straightforward and will be familiar to players of BattleLore. You roll a certain number of these dice depending on what your stats are on your card. You don't usually roll for defense, but if the target spends order tokens, they can roll for defense as well. There's support, so if you have other units close by, they can support your attack. And of course, you can roll damage depending on your results on your dice. And you can also roll panic, which is basically a retreat move, which will send your enemies scampering off towards their side of the table. Well, what about the miniatures, I hear you ask? Well, they're very nice. These are resin miniatures. Here are some undead. The detail is excellent. Some archers. Now, they do come on these little stands, and my only concern is that they might fall over it. Because they're not square stands, you can't really push a unit together as a group. That's a tiny niggle, but they take up less space, of course, on these smaller stands. You can see these equestrian figures. These are undead as well. Lots of detail there. At this scale, it's very impressive indeed. Very nice. What else have we got? Here's Roland the Brave. These are the good guys, Kingdom of Iron Nest. And then we've got the Styx Undead Kingdom. Good old Styx, River of the Dead. But look at that, very impressive. This is just a dodgy flight stand I've put together because this is a prototype. Some more cavalry figures. Lots of detail there to paint. When the whole set is painted up, it'll look very impressive. Now the style is an interesting mixture of stuff. It's quite stylish. There I can see an influence from Rackham Miniatures, their confrontation game. These shooters, for example, are very Rackham in style. So an influence from there. There's also a kind of Warhammer Fantasy role-play, kind of grim and gritty feel to things, with a little bit of kind of high fantasy as well. If you look at these are the Dark Nosferatu, which are a bit more high fantasy. And then you have things like this lovely steampunk tank, which is kind of Warhammer in feel as well, isn't it? So they've kind of mixed a lot of styles together, but I think it comes together really nicely. It's quite distinctive and it's got character. I really like this kind of thing. We've got some big monsters as well. There's a Hydra. Check that out. Love that. This one reminds me a little bit of War Machine with their automatons. And then this kind of undead dude reminds me a little bit of Confrontation. So all kinds of influences, all kinds of fantasy influences, but a little bit different than your average Lord of the Rings type tropes, which I like to see. I think it brings a lot more character to the game. So as you can see, lots and lots of detail to paint, very impressive miniatures, and I think an entire painted set will look pretty amazing on the tabletop. Well, as you can see, there are all the ingredients in place here for a really nice tabletop strategic battle game. Now, I keep mentioning BattleLore because, of course, just the look of the game reminds me of the BattleLore series. Of course, original BattleLore, the Command and Colours system, and, of course, the Fantasy Flight version of BattleLore. However, there are also a lot of differences here. One is the variety in game modes. As I said, you've got scenarios. You've also got a campaign system, and the campaign is solo. So when you're doing that, you can build your own little town out of these cards to help your efforts to get through the campaign. There's also a bunch of scenario cards which can affect the scenario as it goes along. So a lot of variety in the campaign, which is interesting. And then, of course, you can set up your own battles as well in the Battle Royale mode. So that's a big advantage. The other one, of course, is the order token system. So there's a lot of planning and strategy in the order of activation of your units, and also which order tokens you save for using for defense during your turn, and also to activate your own special abilities. So that adds a sort of level of complexity and a new wrinkle to that system. Of course, unlike BattleLore, you're not restricted by the cards that you play on various flanks or anything like that. There's complete freedom in playing these units. So very impressive overall, and I'm looking forward to getting a game in. As I said, I haven't had a chance to play yet, but from my overview of the rules and the components, it looks like a really good game. As always, make your own decisions about whether you support Kickstarters, do your research and check out if it's the game for you. But that's my overview of Fantasy Commander by Signum Games. Thank you very much for Signum Games for sending me this prototype to check out. And good gaming, everybody. I'll see you on the Esoteric Order of Gamers channel. It's at orderofgamers.com. That's the website. Not only are there heaps and heaps of videos, but there are also almost 400 rule summaries and reference sheets for use for popular games. And of course, I'll be getting around to doing one for Fantasy Commander as well, I'm sure. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. Good gaming. Bye for now.